Again, in Dwight Wilson's Armageddon Now, he has just been dealing in this chapter, Balfour Betrayed, with the response to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion in the 1930s. He goes on, just as the protocols seem to be a perennial concern, rumors of the impending rebuilding of the temple also flourished. In 1931, it was reported that the Jews had applied to the League of Nations for an allotment of land in the heart of Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. The probable basis of this story was the plan for a synagogue, hardly a new temple. The next year, a similar discussion of the possibility of rebuilding included the recounting of an earlier attempt by the Roman Emperor Julian, that is the famous Julian the Apostate, so-called, to rebuild the temple in AD 368. The Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus had reported that those efforts were frustrated by the appearance of mysterious balls of fire which prevented the workmen from building. Julian was warned by Christians that the temple could not be rebuilt until the Antichrist appeared. In commenting on this story, the Evangel magazine said, quote, "The two sanctuaries, the church and the temple, cannot coexist, it would seem, in the gospel era, though they overlapped in its opening decades," end of quote. It was implied that since the temple was about to be rebuilt, the Antichrist must be even more imminent. Arno C. Gaebelein reiterated the tale that young men of the tribe of Levi were being trained in preparation for reinstitution of the ancient temple rituals. In 1936, Dawn magazine spread the report that Rabbi L.J. Schwefel, lecturing in Denver for the Jewish National Fund of America, had predicted, quote, "Eventually the Temple of Solomon will be built in Palestine," end of quote. A similar story was cited from the British Weekly, which quoted Lord Melchett as saying, quote, "The day in which the temple will be rebuilt is nigh, and I will work for the rest of my life to rebuild Solomon's temple in the place of the Mosque of Aqsa." Evangelist Charles S. Price greeted such a prospect with relish. Quote, "When the Jew, under the protection of some great power, for they could not do it alone, tears down the Muslim Mosque of Omar and builds his temple, then the Muslim world will gnash its teeth in rage." He continued, "Even if the Jews were driven out, they would soon come back. Their temple has to be built. The house of the Lord has to be established. As long as the many Arabs or Muslims remain in Palestine, such a thing would be impossible. But remember that in spite of what dictators, nations, empires, or confederacies might do to prevent it, this has to be brought about because the word of the Lord has proclaimed it." Preacher Price then broke into an ecstatic song of Israel's hope, and here's the direct quote from Price. "Back to the land where we lived long ago, where Jordan rolled south to the plain. Out of our exile to Abraham's home, our God is to bring us again. With marble and cedar and silver and gold, our temple will once again raise its glorious head while we worship within, and the God of deliverance praise." End of quote. Although the prospect of a rebuilt temple was not one of the major concerns of the premillenarian mind, it foreshadowed the premillenarian interest in the outcome of the battles over the Holy City in 1948 and 1967. A Jewish Jerusalem was a necessary prerequisite to a rebuilt temple. The Allenby legend also persisted during the 30s and was further embellished. Allenby had been the British general that had conquered Jerusalem, taken it from the Turks in 1917. Prophecy magazine picked up a story from the London Daily Telegraph that General Allenby had been disappointed with his transfer from the Western Front to Egypt, saying, quote, "The last man failed, and I do not see why I should succeed." He had been reassured, however, by General Beauvoir de Lille, who referred him to the prophecy in H. Grattan Guinness's book, Light for the Last Days, which pointed to 1917 as the year of the deliverance of Jerusalem. Allenby was much impressed by a prophecy which was to prove so remarkably accurate, according to prophecy. The editor of the Sunday School Times recounted that C.I. Scofield, he who had given us the Scofield Reference Bible, had written on the occasion of Allenby's capture of Jerusalem, quote, "Now for the first time we have a real prophetic sign." William Bell Riley claimed that even Allenby's strategy had been prophesied. The Turks had surrendered the city out of fear of the airplanes flying overhead. This fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah 31 verse 5. As birds flying, so will the Lord of hosts defend Jerusalem. Defending also, he will deliver it. And passing over, he will preserve it. Encouraged by the large number of what they considered fulfilled prophecies, the Premillenarians anticipated further fulfillments. More about that next time in the chapter Balfour Betrayed. I'll put in a link to Samuel Prideaux Tregelles' analysis of the year-day theory. This is what Grattan Guinness in Light for the Last Days was keeping alive. That's a book, by the way, that I read when I was still a Jehovah's Witness, and I do talk about that in Tregelles' analysis of the year-day theory as a whole. Guinness was the last evangelical champion of the year-day theory that I'm aware of anyway, up until Grant Jeffrey and a few others got a hold of it again in the 1990s. And it's alive again, I see, in speculation about the significance of the next decade or so in Israel's history. So that will be the link. Tregelles on the year-day theory, the first of several segments devoted to that subject. See you next time.